Namaste. So thank you very much to people that came along and to our live audience for tuning in. This series we're going to be speaking about yoga, spirituality, enlightenment, and God, and what that all means. Before speaking, I would like to offer my humble respects to my spiritual masters and our spiritual lineage, and to the Supreme. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vastatya Dishatarane Bhajasri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. So in speaking about these topics, I will be attempting to present to you an authentic Vedic perspective on these subjects. This knowledge which I will attempt to share is from a very broad and profound Vedic perspective. It is not a perspective from any one specific school of thought, although some people may want to frame it that way. This is the most ancient and authentic message of the Vedas. So first, in relation to understanding yoga, what does this word mean? And there's kind of three ways in which the word yoga is understood in the world today. And the most commonly applied meaning of this word is a system of physical postures. But the reality is that this is not really a very full understanding at all of what is the meaning of yoga. Philosophically, and in the academe and stuff, people speak of yoga as one of what was called the 6 darshans, the sadhashana, or the 6 systems of philosophy that were associated with the Vedas. So, like Nyaya, Sankhya, Yoga, etc., Vedanta being one of them also. But I think there is also a appreciation of the term yoga in relation to a broader spiritual system, or a system of spiritual realization which is aimed at both self-realization and God-realization. But the reality is that ultimately the word actually speaks to a state of consciousness, a state of spiritual existence that is actually the goal of human life, what human life is meant for. This is the understanding that is promoted within the Vedas. And so the word yoga has its root, although some people, they come up with all kinds of theories these days, and everybody wants to present something different and trippy. The ancient appreciation is that the word yoga refers to a union. It actually refers to a union. People want to promote the idea. Sometimes it means some harmony between mind, body, and spirit. But the reality is that the union that is referred to speaks to a union of the Atma, or the self, my spiritual existence, who I am, me, the Atma, and the Paramatma, the Supreme Self. Now that is understood and appreciated by different people in different ways, but that's fundamentally what it speaks to. The path of yoga as a broad path that is practiced in this world is extremely compassionate and filled with care. The message is compassionate and filled with care. It is presented within the Vedas in a variety of ways, where you will see that different people in different states of consciousness and people that have different outlooks on life will be able to adopt an aspect of the broader system of yoga for their spiritual betterment. Now, what we're speaking about, of course, with that is the idea, the understanding of a very gradual and progressive journey towards transcendence. This gradual and progressive journey is not marked by like really hard lines. When this understanding, this very broad and encompassing understanding of yoga is not really fully embraced and appreciated, then we may see people want to divide themselves into groups and say, for instance, oh, I'm a Hatha yogi, or I'm a Jnana yogi, or I'm a Bhakti yogi. And in making these statements, they are not truly reflective of what the real yoga system is actually about. When people adopt this type of terminology, it's almost like they are considering something higher and something lower. And being possessed of material consciousness, we may seek somehow to elevate ourselves by speaking highly of ourselves, or to lower somebody else's status in life by assigning sort of like a label to them. And so people tussle and struggle within their own minds and in dealing with others with this idea or misapplication of this idea of higher and lower. So while it is true that we may look at these different applications of yoga as like a ladder, we should not really look at them as being associated with higher and lower. That is not helpful for any individual to do that. It's kind of like as the sun rises, you can go from a condition of pitch blackness prior to the sun approaching the horizon when there's no moon, pitch darkness, to the sun sitting on the horizon in all its radiance and glory, and everything being bright and clear and visible with color and everything all around us. And you cannot say that as the sun is rising, that there are different clear stages. We can see that it is a gradual transition. And in a similar way, the different processes of yoga, which are often referred to as paths of yoga, that are presented in the Vedas from the best perspective, should not be seen as very hard, boxes that we sort of lump people into. That the different processes of yoga were promoted so that people in different situations in life, in different consciousness, etc., would have the opportunity, that we would all equally have the opportunity for full spiritual realization. So earlier I just mentioned, some of the different types of yoga. I'd use the word jnana. Jnana refers to the pursuit of knowledge, of spiritual knowledge. And it was adopted by certain types of people as a way to become completely immersed in a yoga process that brought about or resulted in, if they were fortunate, spiritual realization. Part of that path, but more defined, was also Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga was very much associated with the early parts of what I'll refer to as Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga was for the purpose, it was the eightfold path of yoga, where one gradually came to a position of spiritual realization. But Sankhya specifically deals with the analytical study of both spirit and matter in an attempt to have a profound and deep understanding and realization of my true spiritual existence and the nature of the world and my connection with it. Karma Yoga, and there is a series that I spoke about earlier on this subject, deals with action, where a person learns to act in such a way that their life and their way that they're living brings them to the platform of spiritual realization. And it has to do with the awakening of a mood of serving, where one makes an offering of their life, all the activities in their life, everything, to the Supreme. A term that is often used, and because it was popularized by Vivekananda, as Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is basically speaking about what is more accurately described as Ashtanga Yoga. This Ashtanga Yoga were 8 limbs of a complete yoga system that brings one to the highest state of transcendental understanding. And then the other frequently mentioned and practiced and known about in this world is the system of Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of devotion, of spiritual devotion. When we talk about yoga, we are encouraged to understand that it is not just an intellectual or philosophical or even physical pursuit or a practice, like when a person tries to acquire a skill or some activity that they add to their life, but rather the practice of yoga is best understood as being a spiritual path, meaning that it is a life choice. It is a lifestyle. When a person enters onto a true yoga path, it becomes part of their entire life and everything that they're doing and how they're living, their motivations, their focus, their directions. So, this is different than just, okay, I got to do my yoga for a while, and you go and do your yoga and then you get back to your life and everything else. The system of yoga speaks about a transformation of consciousness, of total immersion and absorption. So the fundamental understandings of yoga are one, that I am a spiritual being, temporarily residing within this body. With that comes an understanding that if I live in a false identity, meaning I am claiming I am male and female and deeply absorbed in that idea, I'm a particular racial extraction, or I have a certain desire, orientation, or whatever. When I live in a state of falsely identifying with the body or anything like this, or my mind, it will always result in distress, pain, and unhappiness. In relation to this world, and we're just dealing with things very briefly here, I should see in my yoga practice that this world is both temporary and it is not my home. If I try to make this my home and something that's permanently I'm going to be connected with, what I'm doing is seeking perfection in that which is imperfect. And we are really discouraged from doing this in the yoga process. I should see that I am actually a transient. I'm moving through this body, I am moving through this world, and I am a transient. And I should be more concerned about my eternal well-being rather than my temporary situation. Of course, I should pay attention, but that should not be the total focus of everything. So to, just clarify this understanding, I'll just read a couple of quotes from the Bhagavad Purana, which is one of the amazing spiritual texts in the Vedas that speak about the yoga process. In this way, the conditioned soul refers to when the living being becomes overwhelmed with a bodily identity and is living in that state. In this way, the conditioned soul, living within the body, forgets his self-interest because he identifies himself with the body, and because the body is material, the natural tendency is to be attracted by the varieties that exist in the material world. And thus the living entity suffers the miseries of material existence. Just as a deer, because of ignorance, cannot see the water within a well which is covered by grass, but runs after the water elsewhere, the living entity covered by the material body does not see the happiness within himself, but runs after happiness in the material world. Is this far out? This is really amazing. The living entity tries to achieve happiness and rid himself of the cause of distress, but because of the various bodies of the living entity, and under the full control of material nature, all his plan in different bodies, one after another, are ultimately baffled. our plans for a home, our plans for perfect love, our plan for perfect happiness. All the plans that we have and try to execute ultimately become baffled. So there is this fundamental formula that we see in the yoga system. We see it in Buddhism and different dharmic spiritual paths and practices. It basically is that ignorance equals pain. If I am ignorant of spiritual truth and reality, if I am accepting something that is unreal as real, I will suffer because of that. So speaking to this point from the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, in the second chapter, Pada, 5th verse, he describes ignorance consists of considering that which is temporary as eternal, the impure as being pure, and misery as being happiness, and the non-self, that is the body or the mind, as being the real self. So I'm not going to speak about this or expound on it, we're just brushing through it. Another very important part of the yoga system has to do with becoming the master of the mind. This is very central to yoga. We're not talking about an artificial imposition, like, I'm going to enter into a wrestling match with my mind and see who comes out on top. We're talking about a spiritual process that brings about change. And rather than becoming enslaved and victimized by our minds, we end up becoming masters of our mind. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, there's the 6th verse or shloka. It states, "For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy." I mean, this is just a concept that doesn't exist within the materialistic civilization that pervades the world now. In fact, people think by giving free rein to the mind, they will find happiness. From the yoga perspective, that is absolutely untrue. So there is this understanding and appreciation that in reality, the human form of life is a great gift. It is considered the greatest of gifts because it provides a spiritual opportunity, an opportunity for actually to attain perfect happiness. But if we are to pursue this path of yoga, there is another teaching within the yoga system that is important, and that has to do with the need for an authentic spiritual guide, a true master of that which is spiritual, the spiritual knowledge and undertaking, what is called guru. But in order, or our responsibilities as aspirants on this path is to seek out such a guide. But one must learn what are the qualifications of such a person, so that we will not be misled by someone posing as a spiritual guide, but who is truly not qualified. And another part of this, and again, I would just like to state, we're moving over these things quite quickly. We're not delving into them at any length. Another important consideration when one looks for a spiritual guide, guru, is to not only consider their personal qualification, but also to appreciate the importance of what's called sampradaya, which has to do with spiritual lineage. This was like a really important point. For people that are undertaking this pursuit of yoga, or anyone that's involved in most of the Eastern spiritual paths or religions, the understanding of the necessity of a spiritual master was considered pivotal. Without one would be considered to be like a ship, a sailing ship, without a rudder. A ship without a rudder means that the ship has simply been moved by wind and by sea currents. If you're on the ship, you are simply at the mercy of the wind and the currents. The spiritual master was likened to a rudder, to make it so that the ship, which is carrying us through this journey of life and our experience, could be guided and directed. So, in speaking of yoga, it is important that we come to embrace the real message of what yoga speaks to and is about. Yoga, or the message of yoga, is a message of great hope. It is a message about self-discovery, discovery of who we actually really are. It is a message of light. It is a message of boundless joy, that which we seek. And it is a message about a limitless ocean of spiritual love. So in closing out today, I'd just like to finish with one amazing mantra from the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, where, and many people are familiar with this, the Asatoma Sadgamaya, this mantra that begins with this line. It says, "Do not stay in illusion. Go towards the eternal reality. Do not stay in darkness. Go to the light." Jyotirgamaya. Do not suffer death. Become immortal. This is the motivation. This is the offering. What that means, we will try to discover as we deal with the other parts of this talk. Thank you very much for being with us today, and please join us. We are just going to have a brief kirtan meditation. We'll be chanting the mantra Gopala Govinda Rama Madana Mohana, and hopefully it will show up on the bottom of the screen. Thank you. Gopala Govinda Rama Madana Mohana. 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 Gopala Govinda Rama Gopala Govinda Rama Madana Mohana 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 Gopala